Good evening and welcome to Metrofocus. I'm Jack Ford. In November 1940, days after the Nazis sealed some 450,000 Jews inside the Warsaw Ghetto, a secret band of journalists, scholars, and community leaders, led by historian Emanuel Ringelblum, vowed to defeat Nazi lies and propaganda not with guns or fists, but with pen and paper. This group of intellectuals deemed themselves the Oyneg Shabbos and risked their lives to create a secret archive containing posters, diaries, essays, jokes, poems, and songs to record the Jewish perspective of life under Nazi rule. Now, filmmakers Nancy Spielberg and Roberta Grossman tell their story in the powerful documentary, Who Will Write Our History? Take a look.
Somewhere, years ago, there was a mother who knew that her son was the cleverest, the most talented, the most beautiful. And now the brightest and most beautiful child in the world lies in a strange street. And his name isn't even known.
We should have seen the worst coming. But we did not want to know the truth. We did not want to see it.
Does the world know about our suffering?
Emanuel Ringelblum understood that he had a story to tell, and it was the most important story he would ever have to tell.
Almost all the photography that we have was taken by the German propaganda unit.
Will the Germans write our history, or will we write our history?
Let the witness be our writing.
Their goal was to write the history of the war from the Jewish perspective. And there was no time to lose.
The worst scenario was in the process of happening.
Writing becomes the only recourse. That was the ultimate act of defiance.
You don't really need guns to fight. You could fight with paper and pen.
This is what made this collection of documents so absolutely unique.
One thing is clear to all of us. Our devotion and constant terror have not been in vain.
Among those taken away was Rabbi Ubabin,
Geli Sexton,
Israel Lichtenstein,
Leib Golden,
Abraham Levin,
Halina,
Emanuel Ringelblum.
Remember, my name is Nahum Gazivich.
I am writing this as a witness.
And joining us now with more on this is the film's executive producer, Nancy Spielberg, and the film's writer, director, and producer, Roberta Grossman. Welcome to both of you. I mentioned to you before, and I want to say it again, we're on the air, it's a breathtaking film. And it does what you want films to do. It grabs you, it makes you think. In some ways, it haunts you with this. So let me start with the question I often ask to filmmakers is, where did you get the idea from, and why did you decide that this was the time to do it?
I'm going to throw that to
Roberta. You start.
She started this whole mess.
So I read a review of Sam Kassow's book, Who Will Write Our History, that the film is based on, and I was kind of shocked because I didn't know the story, and I have spent my whole life reading and learning about the Holocaust. And once I was 10 pages into Sam's book, I realized that this was the most important unknown story of the Holocaust. As important, I think of the Oyneg Shabbos archive as the Dead Sea Scrolls coming out of the rubble of the ghetto, the destroyed ghetto, but instead of having a beautiful museum like we have for the Dead Sea Scrolls in Jerusalem, the Ringelblum archive, the Oyneg Shabbos archive, had remained pretty much buried. Even though it had been taken out of the ground, we didn't know about it. So the film is the best way to get the story told.
Why do you think, Nancy, I'll ask you this, why do you think we didn't know about it?
It's funny because when Roberta first told me about the project, and she talked about these secret buried archives, I thought also, great story, almost Indiana Jones, like.
Right.
But part of it was this was behind the Iron Curtain. And there wasn't money also to really handle the material properly once it was unearthed. And a lot of it was in, bad state because of water damage and things like that. So until we could have access to it, until, when I say we people, money came in to try to preserve the papers, it was very low profile. And also, and I think we've talked about this, is that maybe it wasn't the time. Like right after these documents were found, it was still a time where people were talking to the survivors. And the archive is full of the truths, and some of the truths are ugly, and talks about, you know, the Jewish police that turned people in, and things that nobody really wanted to pay attention to at that time. It was more about celebrating or appreciating or respecting the survivors and not delving into the dirty stuff. And so maybe it just needed some distance for people to look at the whole scope.
So when I'm watching this, I'm going back and forth between a sense that I'm watching a documentary, sort of traditional documentary, and the sense that I'm in the midst of a feature film. Why decide to do that in kind of a different fashion, I would think, but a fashion that was very effective, but different? Why?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, everything of the archival material that we've seen of the ghetto, everything that exists, the photographs and the footage, were all taken by Nazi propaganda units in the ghetto. So it's already suspect because they were shooting in the ghetto to show the Jews in the worst possible light. And it was all on the streets, right? So there's nothing in people's homes, and there's nothing to dramatically tell the story of the archive, how it was formed, the risks that they took, what they collected. And so I think of this film as turning the basic assumptions on its head, because we primarily think of archival material as accurate and true, sort of unassailable. And we think of dramatizations as being somewhat suspect. But this film turns it on its head, because the archival material was shot by the Nazi propaganda units, and the dramatizations are all based word for word on the writings from the archive. And we went to great lengths in order to have those two things live together, a drama and a dramatic feature and a documentary. Everything had to have a lot of gravitas. So the dramatic elements are all very carefully researched. Our production design team worked with scholars in Poland for 6 months before we arrived, vetting every pen, every button. I mean, it was really kind of insane. So the overarching goal was to have the film have the gravitas of a documentary and the emotional pull to bring audiences in of a dramatic feature.
You know, also there's such limited archival footage, and there's nobody left alive from that group to tell the story. And you know, those are the challenges of making historical documentaries, but I think we see it also as a huge responsibility, because if we're tackling a topic like this, there's no creative license. Yeah. You know, we're not allowed, not in this, because we're trying to preserve a piece of history, you know, really like crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. And Roberta, you know, when we first met and when we started working together, it was really because she handled these dramatizations so beautifully.
Let's talk a little bit more of the content here and how this group came to be. And what it was that they believed that their mission was. Well,
and I'll let Roberta answer a lot of this, but Emanuel Ringelblum was an activist. He was very involved. He was one of the founders of YIVO. And when he saw what was happening, when there was a realization of what was happening, his documentary, historical, you know, the way he went about documenting and reporting things kicked into gear. You know, that it was going to be a report. It was going to have all the right facts, but it needed a variety of, you know, people in that mix. So it wouldn't be one skewed, you know, because the group that he put together involved religious and not religious and socialists and from all walks of life, so that all together, you know, everybody's point of view would be shown. So, you know, I think that's how he originally saw his role.
When you look at it, I would think if he was looking at this as he was going to record history, he was going to document what was taking place. And as you said, he wanted to make sure that it wasn't the Nazi propaganda films that were designed to dehumanize and victimize the Jews. They wanted to show what life was really like. But they must have believed that this was not going to end well for them.
Well, you know, the goals of the Oneg Shabbos evolved over time. When they first began, right after the ghetto, they met 8 days after the ghetto was sealed and Jews couldn't go in or out. Their initial goal, and I learned this from Sam Kassow, their original goal was to collect the raw materials the primary documents from which they and others would write the history of the war after the war from the Jewish point of view. And then as the bottom began to drop out and things got worse and worse and worse, their goals changed. They then part of their goal became to document Nazi crimes. And then when they realized that mass genocide was happening, then their goal became rescue, to document what was happening and to sneak out really well-documented material through the Polish underground in hopes of rescue. Ultimately, when they knew that they were all going to, mostly likely all going to die, their goal was to somehow bury and preserve the truth so that after the war, when it was dug up, they would be remembered as individuals, and the story could be told from the Jewish point of view. And they also believed that what they had recorded, in the depths to which they, and breadth, as Nancy was saying, to which they had recorded things, that when that was dug up and people read what went on, that this kind of thing would never happen again.
Which is when you go back to the question I asked before, why now? So you were being interviewed one time before, and people were mentioning Schindler's List.
Right.
First of all, that was 25 years ago,
25
which
years
was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that we still need to be having these conversations.
Maybe even more so.
Yeah.
It seems like things have gotten a lot worse in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the rise in anti-Semitism right now, it's you know, I just said somebody should chart how many attacks there are on a daily basis and put it on a calendar, because I think it would be shocked, because I don't pick up anything without seeing every single day something is happening. And the more it happens, it becomes commonplace and acceptable.
But there are other parallels as well, and we could not have known when we started the film now 8 years ago that the story about a group of people willing to die for the truth would come out at a time when around the world propaganda and lies are being used as a political tool for those who want more and more control, more and more power at the top of governments to use. So it's very, very relevant. Or that, you know, as Elie Wiesel said, that the Holocaust didn't start with guns, it started with words. The old technique of demonizing the other, whoever the other is going on a lot all over the world. So it's not just anti-Semitism that we need to be aware of.
We read an article, and it was sort of a shocking article, that Lügenpresse, fake news, was a term used way back when. Right. And it was the term Hitler used very frequently when he was being attacked in the press. So, you know, of course, that's in our face now quite a bit. Yeah. So you can't help but put those, draw that parallel. It was an important tool,
Goebbels and the people that did all the propaganda for Hitler.
Right.
And it was like, if we say it, and we say it often enough, people will believe us, especially about the otherness and the others.
Right.
I'm struck by so much. One is as you're watching it, and this dramatic course, again, you feel like the suspense is there as you're watching this story unfold. And then you have, interspersed with it, the writings and the words from them. And they are at once exquisite. I mean, the caliber of the writing, and yet so frighteningly painful. I remember the one, there's the 19-year-old, I think it was David Graeber, and in his last will and testament, the fact that they're writing their last will and testament.
At 19
at 19. Right. And he talks about something to the effect of what we haven't been able to cry out and to shriek about what's being done to us.
We were not afraid of the risk. What we were unable to cry and shriek out to the world, we buried in the ground. I would love to live to see the moment in which the great treasure will be dug up and scream the truth at the world.
Well, I'm curious about the two of you, and you personally, as you're discovering this and as you're putting this all together, what sort of impact did it have on you personally?
Well, for me, you know, this is going to sound very cliche. It is difficult material, but I've been engaged with this kind of material for all of my life. So I'm not unused to dealing with the extremely difficult subject of the Holocaust. I felt so honored and so lucky to be able to tell the story of Ringo Blum and the Onyx Shabbos Archive, and to be able to bring these amazing writers and these amazing people forward, that was the overarching overarching feeling that I had was not like, oh, this is such difficult material. This is, impacting my, whatever, my
psyche,
my juice, my fresh juice, or whatever. Cold pressed juice. Instead, I felt this sense of engagement and the sense of mission and the sense of that I was lucky to be in the position to tell their story.
And and I come from a whole different place. My family grew up in Arizona. My parents were born in Cincinnati. Grandparent born in Cincinnati. I didn't really know much about the Holocaust. I think really the most I ever learned about the Holocaust was when my brother did Schindler's List. And which is embarrassing because that means only 25 years ago I woke up. But, I knew some, but I didn't know a lot, and I didn't grow up in a household where it was a discussion, but neither did you. You just were obsessed with it, but your parents are American-born.
Right.
And so I think when I started to learn, and when I saw what happened with Schindler's List, and then after that, the Shoah Foundation with the testimonies coming through, one of the biggest lessons I learned is that we need to record the people that lived these experiences because we will have nothing to pass on to our kids.
You mentioned your brother Steven Spielberg and doing Schindler's List, and we talked about engaging with history. And I just want to show a quick clip here that we did with your brother Steven speaking at the United Nations about this need to engage with history. Take a quick look at this.
The survivors' powerful determination to contribute to a future without genocides doesn't come from leaving the Holocaust behind, from escaping history. Their determined demand is that we engage fully with history, that the Holocaust remain with us in memory. Theirs were journeys into the Holocaust. They cannot emerge from it, and neither can the world until there are no more genocides, until the unthinkable becomes impossible.
I did an interview here on the program with a rabbi, and he was talking about this sort of delicate balance he felt he had to engage in talking with his younger congregationists, where he said, I don't want to feel like I'm constantly hammering them with the Holocaust. He said, and yet we need them to know about it. And to have, and it underscores something that we again talked about before, recent studies showing that the majority of millennials don't know what Auschwitz was. So why do you think then it's so important for us to engage in history?
Well, first of all, perhaps what Stephen's speaking about in part is the responsibility that we have to the people who perished in such a horrible way to remember them. That actually most Jewish holidays are remembering.
Remembrance Day, right.
Remembering the Exodus, remembering this, remembering that. So there's something sacred in remembering people, remembering your ancestors, remembering events. Of course, there's supposedly the instructive nature of history. But there was a woman who Ringo Bloom asked to go out into the street during the Great Deportation, when 400,000 Jews were, in a period of 8 weeks, were grabbed off the streets and sent to Treblinka and their deaths. And this woman was a member of the Onyx Shabbos, or loosely associated member of the Onyx Shabbos, a very good writer. And she worked for the Jewish government in the ghetto, the Judenrat, so she had a certain pass that he felt would protect her and allow her to be in the street. And he said, go out into the street and observe what's going on. And it was just too horrible, families being separated, people being grabbed by the Jewish police, by Nazis, by Polish auxiliaries, and dragged away to the trains and ultimately to their deaths. And she said she was writing this report, this eyewitness report, and she hoped it would be used as a stone under history's wheel. So her thought was that if we could really look at this and remember it and know what happened, then maybe that wheel of destruction wouldn't happen again.
I think, listen, that's true. We can't start with a clean slate. We have to hold on to our history because it's just, otherwise, as they say, we're, doomed to repeat it.
We talked about the burial, the process, and buried apparently 3 different locations. But talk about the discovery of the first cache.
So the Warsaw Ghetto was destroyed into rubble as a result of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising in '43. And then in 1944, there was a Polish uprising, and the Germans basically finished off the city of Warsaw after that, and they aerial bombing flattened the city. And really, at the end of the war, almost nobody was living in Warsaw. There was no place to live. And Rachel Auerbach, who our film is told from her point of view, because she was one of the 3 members of the Oneg Shabbos of the 60 people who survived, she was instrumental in insisting that the archive be found, because you have to imagine that among the few survivors, they had other priorities, like, were their families alive, were their children alive, were their wives and mothers, fathers, also how they were going to live, how they were going to deal with their psychological wounds. But there was 3 years after the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 46, because the uprising was in 43, in 1946 there was a gathering to commemorate the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a gathering of survivors, and there were speeches, as there always are, at these things, and Rachel Auerbach just stood up and she said, enough speeches, enough talk, there's a treasure buried underneath the ruins of the Warsaw Ghetto, and I won't rest until we found it. So she really was the driving force behind finding it, and one person was alive, who knew where the archive was buried. He survived by the slimmest margins. He jumped off a train bound for Treblinka and other close calls. And using the spiral of a standing church, one of the few standing buildings, and using aerial maps from before the war, they were able to figure out where that address, where he knew it was buried, was. And that's where they started to dig, and they found the first cache.
I saw it described as like an archaeological expedition.
Right.
Trying to find something that you knew existed at some point, but there are no markers.
Right.
There are no, nothing at all that would lead you to that.
And the second cache was found by accident. So there were construction workers, they were rebuilding the city, and a lot of the belief was if anybody hit upon a box, a metal box, or a milk can, it was where the Jews had buried the gold and diamonds when they were fleeing.
That's right. So what are the chances of, I mean, not opening it up and trashing it because it wasn't gold and jewelry?
It wasn't gold and jewels. And this group was about to trash it, but their foreman said, wait a minute. He said, I know what that is, because it turned out he had a Jewish girlfriend in the ghetto, and he had actually helped her smuggle papers. So he saved those papers from being destroyed.
And the third still not discovered?
There was an attempt about 10 years ago, led by an Israeli, to dig under what is today the Chinese embassy.
Right.
And I think Sam talked about this with us. He said that there was a couple remnants of paper, but either it was completely destroyed, maybe it was looted and then destroyed, or possibly weren't digging in the right place, but he thinks it was destroyed. The chances are it's not there.
Last question for both of you. It's always, I think, maybe sometimes a difficult question for filmmakers to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and that is, what do you hope people will take away from this after they've had a chance to sit down and watch this?
I hope that they will very simply know the story. And our experience has been, when we've shown the film, at maybe it was the second or third screening, and after Q&A, I had this profound realization that when the members of the Oneg Shabbos knew they were going to die, they had 2 primary wishes. One was to be remembered as individuals, and the second was to have the story of the war told from the Jewish point of view, this great catastrophe told from their point of view and not from the point of view of the Nazis who despised them so much as to wipe them off the map. So when people are watching the film, they're fulfilling the wishes of the members of the Oneg Shabbos. And for us, I think that's been pretty
cool.
Remarkable.
Yeah, it's been really cool, because really it becomes an audience experience of fulfilling that wish.
Right.
And I do think also it personalizes the victims. And in genocides and atrocities, we don't really think about the individual. We don't think that there was a mom.
The numbers are so vast. The numbers are so vast that it's impossible to comprehend.
Almost. Yeah, it is. And I think it's important, because I think if we have empathy, that is a call to action.
Well, once again, the film is called Who Will Write Our History? It's, as I said in the beginning, just magnificent filmmaking, compelling story, haunting story that makes you think, which is what great art does. So Roberta and Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And congratulations on great work to both of you. And a reminder for you folks, for more information on Who Will Write Our History, make sure you visit us at metrofocus.org.